What is the difference between fascism and Nazism? When we think about political systems that have shaped history, two terms often come up: fascism and Nazism. While they share some similarities, they have distinct differences that are important to understand. Both ideologies emerged in early 20th century Europe and are authoritarian in nature. They reject liberal democracy and promote extreme nationalism. However, the core of their beliefs diverges significantly, especially regarding race and the role of the state. Fascism originated in Italy and emphasizes the supremacy of the state. It views the state as an all-encompassing entity that controls society and politics. Fascism promotes a unifying national identity that can include various races and cultures. It supports a hierarchical society but does not necessarily base this hierarchy on race. Instead, fascism often preserves existing class structures and elites, placing loyalty to the state above all else. Individualism is rejected in favor of a strong, centralized authority led by a political elite or dictator. Fascism also incorporates elements of corporatism, aiming to mediate between capitalist and working-class interests under state control. On the other hand, Nazism, or National Socialism, developed in Germany and shares structural features with fascism. However, it introduces a distinct focus on racial ideology. Nazism is explicitly rooted in biological racism, particularly the belief in Aryan racial superiority. This belief leads to the idea that Jews and other groups are inferior. The racial hierarchy is foundational to Nazi ideology, influencing governance, social policy, and law. The Nazi state aims to preserve and advance the purity of the Aryan race, often placing the party above the state itself. Nazism incorporates social Darwinism, advocating for racial struggle and the elimination of those deemed racially inferior. It enforces racial segregation and persecution as state policy. From a social anthropology perspective, both ideologies manipulate social identities and cultural narratives to consolidate power. Fascism constructs a myth of national rebirth that can include diverse groups under a state-centered identity. In contrast, Nazism creates a racial myth that excludes and targets specific groups as threats to national and racial purity. Practically speaking, fascism may allow for a more inclusive nationalism that tolerates different cultures within the state framework. In contrast, Nazism demands racial homogeneity and enforces exclusionary and violent policies against those outside the Aryan ideal. This focus on race makes Nazism uniquely genocidal compared to the more state-centered and class-preserving fascism. In summary, fascism centers on the supremacy of the state and national unity across races and classes, while Nazism focuses on racial purity and Aryan supremacy. Both ideologies reject liberal democracy and emphasize authoritarian leadership, but they differ fundamentally in their treatment of race and the role of the state versus the party. Understanding these differences helps us grasp how these ideologies shaped societies and their political and social policies.